You may be seated. Thank you all for being here for Dalton's oral this evening. He has been my senior assistant in Great Books 3 and Rhetoric this year. My name is Stacy Jackson. Joining me on the panel are Mary Henson and Debbie Shelburne. I will pray for Dalton and then we'll let him get started. Father, thank you for Dalton. Thank you for the investment he's made in MCA and the way he's touched lives in our Great Books class and our Rhetoric class. Pray that you'll calm his nerves and help him to share with us the words you have for him to share for us. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Our world is filled with truths. Truths about who we are, truths about where we came from, truths about our morals, our values, our ethics, and truths about the relationships with whom we interact with. Breaking down where truth comes from is one of philosophy's favorite pastimes. Modern philosophers like Jonathan Westphal say, quote, "Many philosophers accept the idea of a priori truths, that is, truths that hold independently of mathematical and ethical truths, if there are any." Interpreting this gives the notion or the idea that truth, essentially and foundationally, does not exist. That truth is just a mist that vanishes away as quickly as it came to be. But I would argue that that is simply not true, that that's a lie, and that to answer the obvious implication, truth does very much exist. We know this because it's been proved by tools like the scientific method and reliable observation. Look at how hot water evaporates into steam. When you put hot water into a kettle and you put it onto a hot stove, the water does not turn into steam in your mind. It turns into steam in reality. It's a fact. It's not an opinion. Or look at gravity, not to be callous, but if you sit on a branch and you saw the branch off while you're sitting on it, you'll meet the ground where it is, literally. Or even math. 1 plus 1 is 2, not 22, not 182. 1 plus 1 is 2. Another example that might be a little more pertinent is parents. Parents have children, right? They have a moral responsibility to feed their children. Not just because of the practical necessities, right? But because there's an emotional attachment. There's a love that that parent exhibits for the child. It is a truth to say that one of the job requirements of parents is to feed their children physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Truth seems to come from using not only just logical precision, but also not straying from the emotional attachment as well. Yet, it seems to be when we talk about truth in today's world, we talk about it either as it being objective or subjective, or wherever truth comes from, whether it be from God, whether it be from man, whether it be from whatever culture you grew up in. But I think what gets lost in the weeds is where truth comes from on the metaphysical standpoint. And that, I believe, is so utterly foundational for the whole concept and point of truth. And so I'm here to argue today, like a lawyer, that reason and emotion must be balanced in order for us to attain truth. But first, I must, if you will, examine the other side. And I want to respond to the most common cited objection to a thesis like this, and I think you can sum it up in the idea of empiricism, or essentially, personal subjective experience is all that matters, reason and emotion be damned out the window. Our values, our relationships, our life philosophies, what we hold near and dear to us, are only a matter of what we've experienced, end of list. Yet, I don't think that this is all that truth is. This view, surprisingly, is held by many millions of people who follow the lead of American psychologists like Margaret Mead and Frank Bowes, who believe that this empiricist worldview and viewpoint is all that truth exists. Where truth comes from is just what you've experienced in the past, currently in the present, and then in the future. Not by what you think and what you felt. All political and religious spectrums have been guilty of this philosophy, and it saddens me to say that this will continue in a world that has fallen. But I want to examine why this is so problematic. Not only with this mindset can you get away with heinous acts and heinous beliefs, and the actions that occur from those beliefs are then manifested in ways that we can't even imagine, but it distorts the foundations of what reason and emotion actually are. Yes, individuals in this circle may say that reason and emotion are actually gone, but I would like to question you, are they? Are they really? Because I would argue they're very much there. They're just being used in ways that we can't even tell in our cushioned 21st century modern viewpoint. Think of the way reason can be used to justify just awful, subjectively felt acts. You can see it throughout history. Look at the dictators of history. Look at Hitler and Stalin and Mao and Pol Pot. Look what they did. They used reason. They used logic. They used their thinking to excuse behavior that killed millions of people. When it's just experience, you can experience anger towards someone, and if laws are just up to experience, then not to be cold-hearted, but theoretically, if my anger is so passionate and reason is just up to experience, I could kill that person based on purely logical law, because reason's just up to experience. But in a way, empiricism might be even more damaging to emotion. It grabs emotion and it thrusts it into extremes far beyond anything we could have ever thought possible. Anything that was ever considered emotion can be used as a pretense, like reason, to act in unspeakable ways. Belligerent anger, lustful desires, hateful attitudes, they're all examples that are allowable under this horrific system of thinking. Who knows how short the span of a thought from your head to your fist will be? You take it out on others. Balancing reason and emotion not only is the only way to keep this horrific nihilistic system from entering yourself, but also from keeping others, if you will, from encountering it. Now, before we dive into this balance, we have to define some words here. We go to MCA, so we have to define our terms. Reason's purpose in this case is that it keeps emotions in check. It does not let emotion fly off the wall in an unspeakable act of rage. Reason's logically analyzing, and it's constantly in a mode of thought. It's analytical. Well, on the other hand, emotion is pure, and it gives humans life. I heard once, I don't know where it was, but someone said that emotion animates and invigorates a person who, if they did not have emotion, would be a lifeless corpse, which may sound dreary, but in fact, I would argue, holds much relevance. With this, you can kind of start to see why this balance is so important and why it's necessary. If you didn't have emotion, right, you wouldn't experience joy, you wouldn't experience surprise, you wouldn't experience sadness, you wouldn't experience anger, you wouldn't experience fear, you wouldn't experience all of these things that make up the human experience. For examples on how this balance is played out, we look to Great Books 4, the junior level English class here at school. And in Great Books 4, students come across Great Expectations, written by Dickens in the 1840s. And in here, the main character is a certain young man who's been orphaned because of the death of his parents, and he's raised by his sister named Mrs. Joe, who is, to put it lightly, an incredibly cruel and callous individual. She physically beats him, mentally tortures him, and is incredibly arrogant in the way in which she handles it. And the situations in which Mrs. Joe inflicts these punishments are not, I repeat, are not on reasoned experience. They are only on whatever her behavior and what her mood is based on. Well, on the other hand, Ivan from Fyodor Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov is coldly rational. He's a hardcore atheistic thinker who shows very little, if any, emotion in most parts of the book. The relationships he had not only are damaged, the ones that he values, but the ones he wants to aspire to are quickly kept and shattered. Any meaningful interaction or relationship is distorted, and it's ultimately destroyed when intelligence swallows up the more human element of emotion. Now, if you think these things can only happen in the realm of fiction, and trust me, I wish they did, they very much do not. The extremes of Mrs. Joe and Ivan play out in the real world as well. And I think it'd be pertinent to, if you will, use an example that we might find a little relevant. In 2011, there was a famed televangelist named Harold Camping. And Mr. Camping used badly decontextualized verses from the Christian scriptures and some very wrong Algebra 1 math to say that the world would end on October 21st, 2011, based primarily on his intuition. Now, I'm not a very humorous individual, but I'm not a calculus teacher, but I'm pretty sure the world continued on after October 21st, 2011. You might need to double-check me on that. And his educated guess, everything he poured his life and soul into became not so educated and became a folly and was considered irrelevant after that. He emotionally felt he could get truth from what he thought he could pick. He could cherry-pick the Christian verses to fit his own narrative. Truth is not attained here. It's distorted. It's destroyed. And it's ultimately victimized when using this type of attitude and this type of mindset. Lives like Ivan and Mrs. Joe and this televangelist are destroyed when we use emotion like hypothetical caffeine. Camping, for instance, the televangelist, was so emotionally raw that not only was his career flushed down the toilet, if you will, but the relationships he had with his wife, the relationship he had with his children, were ultimately destroyed because he essentially made such a mockery of himself. No matter the bridges burned, no matter the costs counted. Now with this, I want to give two essential mandatory reasons for why this balance is so vital and so important. And that is, we must maintain our meaningful relationships we have with others, and we have to understand and know where our values lie and where our values come from. Now, relationships are important because your life is built upon and supported by others. Think of a marriage. If one partner does everything their way and never consults or compromises with the other partner, then the point of the marriage was pointless. And the marriage will ultimately, I would argue, in almost all instances, turn to a divorce. Ask yourself why the divorce rate in America is so high. It's a question to ponder. Relationships take time, and they take concentrated effort, and they take concentrated input by each individual within the marriage. Emotion also takes center stage because you have to have an intrinsic passion to keep the relationship, to keep the marriage. Harmonizing these two things, I would argue, not only brings satisfaction within the idea and the foundation of the marriage, but also satisfaction in the midst of hardship. That's why my parents have been married for 32 years. They've been through hardship, but yet they have a reason why. Now, whatever the values are that you hold dear to you, reason and emotion play pivotal parts in having them. Say you're a Christian, right? And if you proclaim to be a Christian, and then someone asks you why you're a Christian, and you can't give them a reason why you're a Christian, that, I would argue, is an incredibly ignorant usage of reason, because you're essentially throwing something out the window that is a God-given gift. Famed Christian philosopher Francis Schaeffer, in his work Escape from Reason, which I read for my thesis, said that reason is naturally good. And Dallas Willard, in his The Allure of Gentleness, which I also read for my thesis, said, quote, reason is natural, and it's actually a divine gift from God. Reason clearly holds severe precedent in what you believe and how you live out those beliefs. But again, emotion is not far from the fray. One reason why one can give for being a Christian is that there is an innate feeling of belonging to God, one that cannot be explained by mere facts and statistics and evidence and historicities and books and documentation and apologetics classes and all of these other things. Yet, people can and do balance their religious faith by having the spiritual awakening, while also being aware of the evidence and the apologetics classes and the knowledge and the facts and the foundations. They're able to be balanced. So, I know you're asking, what's the point? And is this necessary? What is the purpose for all the talk on balancing reason and emotion? Well, it takes purposeful action, first of all. You're never going to get this balance by accident. You're never going to get this balance come if you hit your head on a rock and you wake up one day, oh, I have this balance. That's not how this works. It takes concentrated effort, and it's incredibly challenging. But I challenge all of you, and I challenge myself to achieve that balance and to find that balance. And after acknowledging these terms, living life, I would argue, is you have to walk this line incredibly carefully, because if you don't, you will fall to the fringes. Leslie had a really great oral on how these extremes play out, and I think one of the best definitions I heard for fringes, or these extremes, are that they're the end points of a, quote, normal or regular point. News media are the prime example of these extremes or these fringes, who just create and crater to idiotic and nonsensical facts or feelings to appease their bases. I interviewed Richard Hallahan, author of A Walk Through David's Garden, who has a degree from Denver Seminary, about these fringes, and he said, quote, "We have the temptation to go to these fringes exactly because of our lack of reason and passion. That we are essentially blind leading blind, and that we just like X, or insert, because X works for us, not because it helps others." You can see that this mindset is incredibly selfish and incredibly damaging. And that's what we don't want. We don't want to be those selfish, only looking at us in mentality. We want to be others-focused, not selfish, right? We want to have an others-focused mindset, not a self-focused mindset. Balancing reason and emotion in attaining truth is to live in harmony and peace with oneself. And I think this harmony and peace is so important, because if you don't have this harmony and peace, you're going to be incredibly, how do I say this delicately, distraught for however long you don't achieve this balance. And you can only imagine the consequences of that. To truly get truth, you first and foremost have to start with a renovation of the heart, as Dallas Ford said. I think that's just that's the foundation in which I have to stand upon. Luke 6:45 says that from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Whatever you think, whatever you say, however you act, it will be externalized in every single facet of your life. It will be externalized in every facet of my life. What you are thinking, the very thought, will be conveyed, and others will see it. Others are always watching, so how will you convey it? But in order for relationships to flourish, for our values to have poignancy and purpose, and for the very foundational essence of truth to have substance, reason and emotion must be fundamentally and foundationally balanced, so that we, all of us in this room, can be completely clear in walking this challenging tightrope, so that we may all pursue the truth as the highest goal. Thank you.
Great job, Dalton.
Thank you. What's with the coins here? I don't. Oh, is that? Oh, wow.
A penny for your thoughts.
Thanks, Mrs. Henson.
So, Dalton, let's start with the obligatory, what are your plans for the fall?
Well, so this was the big announcement part that I told you. I will be attending Baylor University in the fall to major in economics, but I've been accepted also into the Global Scholars Program, so I will be heading to Dublin, Ireland for the fall semester. Along
Congratulations. So are you excited about that just a little bit?
Yes, I'm very excited. Sorry, I just got finished giving a speech.
Okay, so let's jump into talking. Hey, at least you're not making Kool-Aid. So let's jump into talking about your thesis a little bit.
Okay.
Trying to decide which direction I want to go first. Let's start. Define for me objective and subjective truth.
Objective truth is where you have a basis for all of your moral decisions coming from one singular identity or one singular kind of vantage point, if you will. Or subjective truth, it depends on where you are as a person or where you are in certain aspects of your life, and that will determine how you live out your life.
Okay, so can we take subjective truth too far?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can take it to an aspect of morality, right? Subjective morality, that could be a part of your truth, where you could essentially say, look, no laws, no fundamental aspects of code or purpose are going to have any value. So again, as I said with the murder example, right? If there are no laws if you don't abide by a code of ethics or laws, you could take that to an extreme and have a subjective standpoint on, I could harm this person because I can.
Can we take objective truth too far?
I would argue that you can take the effects of objective truth too far. Because I would argue, right, as Christians we get objective truth from God and the elements of God, but also we can essentially insert ourselves into saying God mandated this, and God mandated that, and God said this, and this, and this. And we can insert ourselves into that situation, and then it's a damaging and deadly road to go down to.
So how do we know if we're applying our own filter to
Gospel. I mean, that's like the only way I can answer that question. I mean,
So the word?
Yeah, biblical instruction. I mean, because if we believe that this is objective truth, then let me reword that. If we don't believe this is objective truth, where do we get our other elements of truth from? I don't think you can. I don't think it's a lasting effect. I think it'll last for a time, but people die. Codes go out of, people forget them. So it's that simple to me personally.
So is everything in here true?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to dig down a little deeper on that. So you say your whole thesis is that in order to get to truth, we have to balance emotion and reason. Mm-hmm. So I want to read you a couple scriptures and get your take on it. So in Jeremiah, it says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? I, the Lord, search the heart. I test the mind, even to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruits of his doing." So what's going on there? What are we not trusting there?
We're not trusting the ultimate source of authority. We're not trusting the ultimate source of where truth comes from. We're relying solely and completely on our fallen, failed intuition and reasoning.
Okay, but is that reason or is that emotion?
I think it's a kind of combination.
So you think the heart combines the two?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then let's go over to Romans 1 for a minute. And I've got, let's see if I can remember which verses I wanted to pull out of here. Okay, so verse 18 says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness." What's that mean? Suppress the truth in unrighteousness.
Well, I think, again, because of our fallen nature, we try to naturally find truth in things that simply provide that kind of momentary kick, if you will, that will be helpful in practical day-to-day decisions, but we don't want, how do I say this? We don't want a divine source of truth, because we know that a divine source of truth would have to be smarter and more intelligent and above us, and we don't like that. It's not in our nature to like that.
So it's going back to what Daniel talked about the other day with humility?
Yeah.
Okay, and then in verse 28, he says, "And even as they did not like to retain God and their knowledge, God gave them over to their debased mind.
Well, I think that also goes back to the idea of, I think we talked about this in psychology, with free will. And so God created mankind with free will, correct? And so no matter, you can choose to do good or bad, and clearly you see here that in man's eyes, they did not see the truth of God to be up, or as I would say, down to their standard.
So how do we do this then? How do we apply reason and emotion and somehow get truth out of that equation?
Well, I think you have to have a heart of passion, first and foremost, to want that. You have to have a desire to want that. You're not going to become a Christian accidentally. And so you have to have the heart of the heart to want it, but then you also have to have the knowledge and understanding and the commitment to want to read the Word, to read script, to read manuscripts that help you find that and to help you explain that more.
Okay, now I'm going to get personal.
Oh no. This is.
So we've talked a lot about spiritual formation this
Yes.
year. You've talked a lot with Mr. Westfall
Yes.
about spiritual formation.
Yes.
Tell me what that's... Tell me what... Well, first of all, define spiritual formation in your terms for me.
Yeah, I think I'm going to kind of steal from what Willard says in Renovation of the Heart, where it talks about becoming and putting on the image of Christ-likeness to become conformed to his image further and further. It's a transformational, gradual process.
Okay. And you've been pretty intentional about working on that this year in things you've read, things we've talked about. Mm-hmm. So tell me about the connection between this thesis and Dalton Meeker's spiritual formation.
Well, I, for quite some time, have very much wrestled with the idea of truth because it's something so basic and foundational, and I like arguing about things that are basic and foundational.
He does like to argue.
And so, thank you. And so, I wanted to commit myself to understanding more and more where my relationship and my conforming to the image of Christ can kind of, I guess, meet the middle, if you will, with the idea of truth and the concept of truth. And so, did I answer your question?
Yeah.
No? Yes? Okay.
So, do you think you've made progress in that area?
Absolutely. I look back at, you can look at me 9 months ago and it was kind of a travesty, and so.
Okay, on that note, I'm going to pass it to Mrs. Henson.
Okay.
All right. On that note, do they have Coke Zero in Dublin, Ireland?
I hope so.
Okay. You may have to have a renovation of the heart about that. All right. Let's do the intellect first, and I'll do the emotions the second round.
Okay.
So with the intellect and the mind, do you think it's more like the intellectual heavy lifting, so like the logical part of it and syllogisms and theology and stuff that people are more afraid of? Or are they more afraid of what truth is going to demand of them once they see what actually is true?
I think both 110%.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what's scary about both?
Yeah, well, in terms of what truth demands of them, is that it demands people come off. I think some of the other theses kind of reflect on this. Come off the pedestal, right? You have to look at others on an even scale instead of looking at some other thing or person that you're trying to elevate. Not on an objective basis, but purely on a kind of like, this person, I'm in awe of them or wonder of them. And then for the other part, I think there's a, I don't know how to say this without sounding mean, but I think today people don't like to think. I think thinking now, it requires, I don't know what happened, but more commitment to thinking than it did 10, 30, 50 years ago. And so, and it requires those uncomfortable conversations. It requires those interactions that may be more difficult for them, and they haven't had experience, and they haven't had those interactions before. So,
So thinking takes time and causes the individual to be uncomfortable sometimes.
And interact with things they may not agree with, which I am very grateful for. Like MCA, I've been able to, not only find my own convictions, but then interact with maybe convictions I don't agree with in a place where I can kind of expound upon them.
Yeah, cool. And so then you also said that people are afraid of what truth demands of them because it kind of humanizes and humbles you in a way and makes you a servant in the sense that you're willing to pull the same yoke as other people are, basically. Yep. Cool. So how do you get hyped about that responsibility? Because that also seems like a lot of responsibility, right? If you have to take time to think and understand and internalize that, and then also you're going to be in the process of serving other people because of what truth is demanding on you, like how do you stay hyped about that?
Well, I think that means that you first have to get hyped about serving people. And so I believe that one of the gifts and one of the things I've been able to work on is an enjoyment for serving others and for helping others. And so I think that only comes foundationally with a heart of servitude. And then I think everything else falls in line, if that makes sense. What was the second part of that?
I think that was
okay.
That was it. Just how do you get excited about that responsibility?
Because then you can see it play out in other people, right? People get excited. If my dad got me a Christmas gift, and then I opened it, I'm not the only one excited, right? He's excited because he sees the joy and the thrill of it.
Yeah. And so, what do you think are some of the limits of intellectual exercises? Like, I know we take apologetics here, and I took an apologetics class in high school, but sometimes, it's nice to feel like you have an argument on lock, or that you, have control maybe, or total intellectual understanding of an idea. But sometimes what happens is I think those become isolated, incidents to some degree, or even, emotions can be that way too, where it's people end up chasing or having a spiritual high, or the children of Israel can see God perform a miracle, and then X number of months later, it's just kind of out the window. And so how do you kind of transition that knowledge or those emotional experiences that do have a degree of truth behind them into something where it's an ascent of the whole person?
That is a loaded question.
You got it.
I would probably say you have to have...
Or maybe why do we stop short of truly being changed?
Yeah. Well, I think there's, again, it goes back to the free will idea I was mentioned earlier, and that, I don't know how controversial this is, but I think people will do whatever it takes to not have to put in the effort, if it makes sense. I think because, and I'm probably the number one person guilty of that. And so taking effort requires thinking, which also in turn requires effort. And so you have to, balance those two things out in order to attain the wholeness, if you will.
What's an act of service that you've seen change you?
Honestly, it's I'd probably say the RT leadership thing. I mean, going into, when did we start that? 10th grade? 10th grade? 10th grade, I did not want to. I was very much not in the heart or the mindset to be that. But I think, I can't remember who I had a conversation with. I think it might have been you. I think it was you. Where we kind of had really a heart-to-heart conversation about why I was in that mindset, and then I easily saw the flaws of thinking that way. So then I could kind of redirect it to a different and more healthy approach of thinking.
What have you found is like the balance? Because I know you read a lot, basically, and so what have you found is the balance between like kind of cultivating the soil and gathering new ideas through reading, and then taking time to like serve, but also like receive from other people as well?
Yeah, that I think it goes also to the the amount of reading I do, and then again the servitude. I think I have to go back to the servitude, because when I serve someone, when I go help a person or a neighbor or a friend, the effect of that help is being mirrored in a way where I can see myself, I guess, in a way that's more humble, that shows, I didn't want to do this maybe in the first place, but now where I am, it's brought me to a more, I guess, almost brokenness, if you will. That requires a healthy cultivation of the brokenness, but then of ascending to a different and better mentality.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's how, I don't know, that journey becomes unique and allows us to stand as an individual before God, because a lot of those things, just like serving other people or something like being an RT leader, you can think there's like hundreds of people that have come through MCA and done that, so this isn't really anything like, special or unique or different, or using my intellect in this way didn't lead me to some sort of, higher truth that no one's thought of before. It allowed me to pull the same yoke as other people, but in doing that, there's something that allows you to kind of become an individual before God, and that deeply like personalizes it in a way that's unique and special that no one can take away. And so
definitely.
I think that's cool. All right, I will pass it to Mrs. Shelburne.
All right, Dalton.
Hi, Mr. Shelburne.
Hello. All right, you've had this think tank here. I'm out of my element, all you thinkers here. I like to think, but not as deep as y'all do. Okay. So we're just going to do a little comic relief here a little bit, okay?
Okay. Oh, no.
I know you're the intellectual guy,
I'm sorry.
so we're going to talk a little emotions, okay?
Okay.
But first of all, I will go back to reason. Was it reason or emotion that made you choose the last time slot for this thesis week?
I mean, I'm going to get heart to heart here.
Okay.
Honestly, emotion. I wanted to fundamentally serve my classmates, because I know they didn't, there had been talk like, no one really wants this time, and I thought, well, that's kind of like it's a small, in my eyes, a small thing to take advantage of, and so I'll step up and do it. And so, I had I had, obviously, I had a lot of like compliments for it, but I to me it was just very okay. Like, it's a 7:15 time slot on a Friday. I didn't get the weight to it, but yeah, it's probably the emotion part.
Okay, because who else wanted it, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And really, you were early in the round. You could have chosen any day.
Yeah.
So
Simi got the first slot.
I know. Yeah. I like Simi getting that first one over with. But I'm going to end with you, so that's good.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
All right.
Yeah.
So, you and I go a long way back. Mm-hmm. And so, so I have seen that servant's heart, and I thank you for it, because you're that little invisible servant that's just serving everybody, and a lot of times no one notices. And so I have seen that since 7th grade on, and so I thank you for being that servant. And I just commend your mom and dad for raising you to be such a young gentleman, because we just went to Waco, and you were such a gentleman to take care of all the girls that you had chosen to make this trip with, okay?
Yep.
And so was not easy. I know you had a lot of reason, and I know you had a lot of emotions that came up, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, original oratory.
Yeah, yes. And so anyway, so I commend you for that. I want to go to relationships because, as I say, we go far back. And I remember that little 7th grade Dalton.
I'm sorry.
No, he was wonderful. I remember he was always right there, and I think that I probably was the only tutor that you talked to out of class.
That's probably accurate.
And do you remember that you'd eat your lunch early and you'd go serve, and then you'd come back during lunch and you would eat lunch with me?
Yes, I do remember that.
Okay. And I thought, this kid's got to make it. You know, his mom and dad trying to push him out of the nest, so I'm going to have to help him here, you know?
That early.
So, yeah, that early. Because
7th grade, get out of here.
Because we could see you were this little homebody and you were comfortable.
Yep.
So I gave you assignments.
You did.
I'd say, okay, meet me over here, and we're going to eat lunch in the lunchroom, okay? And then I would give you assignments. I want you to go eat with 2 people you don't know, and you're like, why? You got to meet them, okay?
Yeah.
So we've gone through this long process, you and I.
Yeah.
So now, look, how many people are at this oral?
Yeah.
Pretty awesome, all right?
Yeah.
When you wouldn't even talk to anyone but me, all right?
I know.
And I, anyway. So I know now you flit around to every tutor's office and everything. And I know you have us kind of locked in as labeled.
No, I think I know where this question's
So
going.
your relationships with your tutor, okay, we'll start with your leader here. What do you go to Mrs. Jackson for?
What should I answer with first?
Any way you want to.
Anyway?
Yeah. Reason or emotion, either one.
No, probably more reason. I don't know. I don't know. Personally, I connect more with Mrs. Jackson, like on an intellectual level, if you will. Like same with like Mr. Custer, and so, yeah.
Okay, they're your intellectual gurus.
Yeah, if you will.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Westfall.
Probably my spiritual director. Well, all.
Okay, y'all.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I hear you in Mrs. Telshow's office.
Yeah,
so
I go for her. I go to her with all of my problems.
Probably.
I don't blame her for not being here. I don't blame her. She deserved it. Yeah. I would have. Yeah.
Okay. So we could probably go on and on because I know you just go around.
We probably shouldn't, though.
Okay. So I am going to ask you
what your role is.
What is my role?
Oh, you're like everything squared.
Now explain that squared.
Well,
I'm not the mathematician.
I'm sorry, Mr. Blackburn. I know I had problems in algebra too, but I think it's explanation times explanation is explanation squared. Meaning I go to you for everything. I go to you with when I'm teary-eyed, when I'm joyful, when I'm in the high mountains, on the plains, or in the low valleys, and so.
So why did you not want me on your oral panel?
Oh no, this is just yeah.
Would you like me to pass the mic?
Preferably.
Okay.
I plead the Fifth Amendment to that. Oh no.
Why didn't you want Mrs. Shelburne on your panel?
Well, actually, I do have an answer, and I don't mean it out of mean-heartedness. I was thinking about what you had said earlier about the whole, going back to 7th grade or 6th grade me. What a nightmare that must have been. About not, expanding my horizons, if you will. And I thought, at this platform, at this time, if I was, place tutors on my panel who I don't have, that interaction or that connection with, because then I can get, have the open limelight, if you will, but then have that kind of conversation that we have maybe on an everyday or other everyday basis, but then with people I don't interact with, and so. But I am very glad you're on my panel. Yeah, exactly. You wrote. What did you write? You wrote "Go get 'em" and then a kind of creepy smiley face, but. Just being honest. Okay.
Okay,
The
so
actual question.
yeah, we're running out of time.
Oh,
so
no.
a couple of lines of questioning. Are reason and emotion sufficient to figure life out without relationship?
No. No,
So-
they're not.
Tell
Okay.
me more.
Well, I said earlier that relationships are important because they're built upon and supported by others, and every single person on planet Earth has had a relationship with at least one other human being. And so how you then connect with that person, it's kind of like I guess if you will, one of those domino lines, right? You know, one domino falls and then the rest. And so one relationship will expound to many different relationships, and those relationships will help you with connections, and those connections will help build you up, and building up will, make you into a better and a stronger and a more, mentally, physically, emotionally healthier individual. And so I think relationships are, I think, the foundation.
So, what do you think is the most important relationship there?
Between me and God.
Okay.
The relationship between God and me and God is the most exclusive, intimate relationship I can have with the being. Because I think I was talking with my mom about this sometime in the past when I said, or we were talking about you'll bring things to your parents, you'll bring things to your spouse, you'll bring things to, if you have children or siblings or friends, but you can bring everything to God, no matter wherever it is in the life spectrum or the life grid. And so furthering that, like with the spiritual formation issue or the issue element, it's more, I think, proves it the most important, definitely.
Okay, one more.
Sorry, can I add
Yeah,
something?
go ahead.
It's challenging, I can tell you that, and it's challenging for people I know who have, I think, sought and tried and wanted that. But I think that unless there's, again, that it goes back to the whole that we've heard throughout the theses of the humility aspect. I think then and only then can you see that the fullness of the relationship.
Okay, one more question that's kind of sort of tied to that. So, you said that you and I have a lot of intellectual conversations, which we do.
We also have a lot of emotional ones.
I was about to say, so yeah, a few of them have gotten a little emotional.
Yes.
And we had a talk about reacting versus responding.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about the difference between reacting and responding.
Yeah, so reacting would be when I'll use the example that almost made it into my thesis about if you're getting robbed, the reaction would be a fight or a flight type situation where you're either going to engage with the individual or you're going to flee from the situation. That would be a reaction, since it doesn't involve an analytical kind of decision making, whereas a response, you don't really have time for a response in that situation. But if we're having a conversation, I'd rather respond to you because I'm putting in effort and putting in hopefully if you will, kinder words, or words that have purpose and poignancy, not a reaction of just emotionally flying anger, right? So,
okay, so we have had
both of those both of those types.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say that, but we have had conversations where, let's just say that we were coming at objective truth from different places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, how does truth fit into this response versus reacting thing? So I guess what I'm asking is, if we're objective truth is out there, mm-hmm. but I'm coming at it from my subjective truth, and you're coming at it from your subjective truth, and the two don't meet in the middle, how do we figure that out?
Ultimately, I don't think you can. I really don't. There are just, and I will stand on this statement, there are certain foundational interactions and conversations that there will be this, and there just won't be common ground. And we've experienced some of those. And so, but we know, because we've matured in having a relationship, we don't let that end the relationship, right? And so you walk away calmly.
So where does objective truth come into that?
Objective truth?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we take objective truth to be God, then we listen again to the instruction about how then we interact with it and how we're in the conversation we're interacting with. And so
it's a live interaction with the Holy Spirit?
Oh, definitely.
Okay. All right, I'm going to pass it on.
Okay, sounds good. Sorry, that sounded kind of mean.
All right, I've got a few more, and then I'm going to pass it off to Mrs. Shelburne because I want to laugh again. Okay, so let's see. So some emotion questions, I guess. So we obviously don't really want to be led around by our appetites and passions and desires and things like that. But I do think one of the things that can happen is a lot of time conviction seems to come like with a lot of immediacy and is just very present. And you can deaden that through hesitation, right? So you can deaden conviction through hesitation. And I kind of think that's one of the things that Jesus loved about Peter is that most of the time what he was trying to do was sincerely express his personal relationship with God. And sometimes that worked out really well, and sometimes it ended up with his failure. So how do you kind of differentiate between something that's an appetite that's trying to lead you somewhere you shouldn't go versus what's conviction that you need to act on immediately?
Yeah, I like that question. I think, a conviction should be something that drives you and something that is behind, if you will, the choices you make. But the conviction itself should not be the driving force, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I can explain further. That the thing that you believe in, the conviction you have, is where everything comes from, where it is, how do I say this? The reactions from that, if you will. Mm-hmm. That all action A, action B, action C, and thought A, thought B, thought C come from the conviction, but you don't let the conviction overtake the emotional part and, lead you into kind of like an emotional rampage, if you will. Mm-hmm.
So it's pursuing kind of that harmony with God you've been talking about.
Yes.
Okay, cool. And then my last question before I pass it off to Mrs. Shelburne. It seems like a lot of acts of faith in the Bible, they don't just transgress the intellectual side or the emotional side. They transgress both at the same time, basically. And so that's what makes it, seem like it's not just this pendulum of I went too far here or here. It's like they step over both of those lines simultaneously. And so why do you think faith operates in the world that way a lot of the time, where it doesn't look like you have harmony with those two, like you're transgressing both of them?
I would probably say that because we have an errant view of faith, that we think faith is just this kind of mystical force in the air, and that we have kind of, if you will, faith that we have faith, I would say. But what faith should be is that we have faith in something and faith of something that thing will work. Mm-hmm. Not that faith should be just another commercial, if you will, of how we are supposed to live life. Mm-hmm. I don't think I answered your question. Do you mind rewording it?
No, I think you did.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I think you were saying it's tied to a deeper value of hope, basically.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Hope in some promise, and it's kind of the flesh and blood means of trying to work that out, I guess, in fear and trembling, as Kierkegaard would say. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, cool. All right.
Okay, Dalton. So you're going to Baylor, and you're choosing economics, and you like to argue. So why aren't you going to go into law?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question. I had a family relative who actually asked me that, and because I don't want to be an argumentative person my entire life. I truly don't. Because I have seen the negative problems of that, and I don't say this a lot, but I think I've matured in this element, and that is discernment. And so I know that I could easily fall prey to being far more negatively argumentative than positively argumentative.
Okay.
And so...
Okay. All right.
That's why.
Well, Dalton, I'm glad you're going to Baylor, and you are going, Dublin. That's a sign you've got to switch over to Dr. Pepper, because there used to be the Dr. Pepper, thing in Dublin.
Yeah.
So, see, that's just great. And you're going to need a very big suitcase, because I've got to go with you.
Okay.
This is big.
Okay.
So, anyway, Dalton, I do have one more question.
Yeah.
I need to know, you and Lane have been my lifeline on all this Apple technology. So now you're both going to Baylor. I'm up a creek. So can you suggest to me a junior that I might get to help me with all this Apple stuff?
Yeah, probably Levi.
Levi.
Yeah, he's right over there.
Levi, will you be my junior? Okay. All right. Thank you for that recommendation.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay. Because I can't give you a recommendation in some things,
Okay.
like dog sitting. But
Sorry. We're not going to go. We're not going to visit the past.
We won't go there.
We're not visiting the past.
No, I will forgive you.
Oh, thank you.
Anyway, Dalton, it has always been kind of a thing that I like to, you think you're finished with your thesis and you have one more week of school, but
Yeah.
you have the Shelburne test that you have to pass.
Oh, okay.
Or there is no graduation next Saturday.
Okay.
Okay. So I do have my test for you.
Okay.
And so this is very key since you chose the last slot. So this test is Dalton's last test at MCA. How well do you know these phrases that are related or contain the word last? Okay, so I'm giving you half of the answer, last.
Okay,
All right.
okay.
So it's easy test. If you fail this,
Okay.
you're in trouble.
Okay.
All right. The Passover meal that Jesus ate with his disciples on the night before his death.
Last Supper.
Oh, very good. 1 point.
Can I ask what the point of this is?
The point is, you never know what I pull out of my hat, so this is the point. I'm trying to make you miserable, okay? You have been talking all this intellectual stuff.
Did Simi get the Shelburne quiz?
No. I like Simi. Okay. All right. Okay, this is you. Pushed to the limit. A person is pushed to their very capacity.
The what?
I knew you would. Pushed to the limit. A person is pushed to the last capacity they can
Yeah,
get.
their limit.
It's got to have last in it.
Oh, their last, like, I've heard it, like last breath, their last moment.
You can
What am I
phone a
missing?
class member.
Last straw. Okay.
we'll get it.
What's the? Okay, I still haven't gotten the answer.
This
What's
point
the
is, you
of
just
this?
got to humor an old woman. Okay. Okay, one more.
Whatever.
An iconic response to an absurd statement one makes when he or she is not sure of its result. No. If you don't want that one, I can give you another one.
Okay. Give me another one, 'cause
All
I
right.
just forgot.
This is a good one. This is
Okay.
you. Okay.
Okay.
People who are decent, friendly, and agreeable tend to be unsuccessful because they are outmaneuvered or overwhelmed by others who are not so decent, friendly, or agreeable. Nice guys.
I don't. Okay, I didn't prepare 8 months for this, so.
I know.
Can you? No. Okay.
This is life. You're never
Oh,
prepared
that's
for
true.
everything. So phone a classmate.
Nice guys always finish last. I don't. You know what? This is.
It's okay, Dalton.
Thanks.
I will pass
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Because I knew I did this on purpose because
Oh,
I
clearly.
knew that this would just throw you for a loop.
Yep, it surely did.
Just like Dane through Mr. We just, yeah.
Ouch.
Anyway, well, Dalton, it has been a pleasure, and I will pass the mic.
Okay.
It's your
It's my turn. Okay. So I wanted to ask a question that was relevant. Sorry. So
Take that diploma back.
okay, go ahead. Put it through the shredder. So I used the example of a marriage in my idea with relationships. And so each of you have been in successful marriages, and it's argued that marriages are essentially the highest form of a relationship, like the highest honor, if you will. How does this reason and emotion balance play out in your marriage? Your husband's in the audience, so.
Yes, I know. Thank you for that heads up.
You're welcome.
In our marriage,
That you would use kind of like an example for other people.
we have to make the effort for the emotion part because we're both thinkers. And so we have learned that sometimes we have to take a time out and think about what those emotions are and how we're going to respond versus react.
Yeah.
Because reason might say that we do something that is more intelligent than what our emotions are saying we should do. So,
Yeah.
I think a lot of it comes with like support for the other person's growth process and personal journey with God. So because obviously you are on part of this journey together, right? But there's also part of it where God calls you to different things as well too. And so understanding where the other person is at, and knowing what sort of like support they need during that time. And so whether that's you're creating something together, or whether you're supporting them doing something else, I think that's been really valuable for both of us, learning to balance and manage that and communicate what sort of support and help we need, and being able to communicate the things that God has been teaching us and being willing to share them with each other. Because I think whether you're doing something, together as a team, working on creating something together, or you're kind of, doing parallel things for a little bit, you can always come back and share with the other person what God has taught you. And so I think that's the ultimate responsibility. And I think part of the beauty of it, of becoming one, but also a quote I really like about marriage is having space in your togetherness as well, and growing side by side. Is beautiful to watch someone grow and learn about God and know Him in a way that's different from you. That's also very beautiful and holy and sanctifying. So.
Beautifully said, Mary. Ours, gosh, we've been married. We will be married 41 years in August, and ours has been built on just that commitment and growing together and open communication. Just so key on communication. I don't like that. I'm totally mad at you right now. I'd like to, just walk out that door, not come back. But I know that I'm not going to do that because that commitment and growing together. And it's been just so special because we haven't had a lot of those times because we do keep that open communication. And as long as Mr. Shelburne knows that I'm always right, everything will be fine. Okay? So that's the key thing. I have it tattooed on his arm,
Okay.
She's always right. But anyway, so that's marriage is wonderful.
All right. we are done with all of them. So let me close out Dalton's thesis and this entire week in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for MCA. Thank you for the journeys that you've been leading these seniors on. Thank you for the journey that you've been leading Dalton on, God. I pray that he will continue to know you more and to love you more, to find the perfect balance between his reason and emotion, and to use those to act in faith to serve others, God. I pray that we will all continue to love and to serve you, to be strengthened as the body of Christ, as the body of students, and as the body of believers, God. I thank you for this time just to share, to listen, to have a conversation, and I pray that you will continue to guide us more and more into your kingdom every day. In Jesus' name, amen.